Good evening, everybody. Our first masterclass of 2026. I'm Cindy Holmes. I facilitate the International School of Intuition and Healing. Welcome to all of you far and wide across the globe. We're so excited to start 2026. A little bit apprehensive of having mopped up 2025 and continuing to do so in January, it seems, but a very warm welcome to everyone. Tonight, I'm not going to talk for too long because I really want us to get started. I'm keen to hear what the themes are for this year, what I can start preparing myself for. And we have Margarita, who has been the school's resident astrologer for a number of years. She does a lot of different work out there. She works with tarot, she works with astrology, and recently has done a whole lot more. But tonight she's talking to us about astrology and 2026. So thank you so much, Margarita, for being here, starting the year early, and really supporting our community in anchoring into what is in store for us in 2026, helping us set those intentions, helping us align to be the best versions of ourselves that we can be. So I'm going to zip it for as much as possible and hand over to you.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Cindy. Welcome, everyone. I'm not going to pretend that I'm not nervous to see the number of people that are in this room. I don't know that I've actually spoken to such a big group before, which either says that I'm brilliant and amazing or everyone's freaking out about the year ahead. It's probably the second one. So welcome. We have an hour and a half together tonight. I'm going to, for those of you who know me, I speak at the speed of a bullet train. Because I have so much information that I want to share tonight with all of you, and trying to throw in as much personal information that I can for each sign. So if you know a little bit of astrology and you know your rising sign, please listen out for that, because that's going to really speak to you at certain points. If you only know your sun sign, aka your star sign, that's perfectly okay as well. Listen out for that too. We're going to hold questions until the end of the webinar. So if there is something burning, please hang on to it. Pop it in the chat box. Cindy will keep an eye on it. And for now, if you want to just introduce yourself or just say where you're from, it's always nice for me to get an idea of who's here from all around the world. So yeah, not much introduction for me needed, but for those of you who don't know me, Margarita, I've been practicing astrology for, past lives. But I've been practicing professionally for about just over 10 years now, a decade, and my business has really kind of evolved into a lot of mentoring and teaching. I'm super passionate about astrology. I love what it can do to help us get into the flow of things and tune in rather than swim upstream. So for me, that's the kind of purpose and the point of these kinds of talks. So I usually do these talks about 1,000 times in the beginning of the year, but actually you guys are the first to hear the 2026 talk. So you have sparkly new information. So sit back, relax, take a deep breath, listen carefully, store up your questions. We're about to jump on a bit of a ride. And I think I'd like to open by saying, or by just leaning into the overall themes that I'm picking up for 2026 from an astrological point of view. And also just a little caveat to say that this is obviously going to be very generalized. And what I'm going to be saying to you is very much on the collective. Yes, there's going to be moments for each rising sign or each sun sign, but obviously you have your own birth charts. And within that birth chart, there's a whole bunch of things going on that are going to affect you more directly than some of the things I may speak about tonight. So some of the things may really land because, these planets might be touching a very sensitive part of your birth chart. And some of it might not because it's not touching a sensitive part of your birth chart. So just keep that in mind. So I'm not a numerologist and I'm also not a Chinese astrologer, but what I do know is that 2025 was in numerology and the year number 9. And in numerology, that's the year of endings, of closure. And 2026 is a number 1 year. So store that in mind because that's going to be an important point to come back to. The second thing I know about in Chinese astrology is that 2025, and still is going on for about a month or so, is the year of the snake. So it's the year of transformation, the year of shedding old skin, the year of, really this metamorphosis. And as we know, it's never easy to shed old skin. For a lot of people that I've been speaking to, 2025 was particularly difficult. There were and are still a lot of endings going on, a lot of closure, and a lot of skin being shed. For me personally, I had one of my best years ever, but that was also because none of those ending planets were necessarily affecting my personal birth chart. So I kind of got out scot-free of 2025. I'm sure 2026 will be interesting. So, how this correlates to the astrology is super interesting. The number nine and the year of the snake. So in 2025, and still as we speak, right? So remember, the 1st of January is very much, and I'm going to try not to be too Aquarius about this and go into the whole politics of it, but it's very much a calendar, it's a calendar moment. It's not necessarily anything special in terms of the moon, where the moon is or where the sun is, or sort of any planetary alignment or configuration. In astrology, the new year actually starts on the 21st of March when the sun enters Aries. So for those of you who may have had a slow start to the year, or you want another chance, you've got March. March is coming. But so, even up until this point, even now in January, we are still moving through this theme of endings and of closure and of shedding skin. We're still here, basically. It's still going to be a little while before we start the new chapter, the number one. That's very much symbolized by the numerology, the Chinese astrology, and the astrology that I do. From an astrological point of view, the reason for this is because there are 3 planets currently, as we speak, moving in the very last degrees of the astrological sign that they're in. These 3 planets are Saturn, Neptune, and Uranus. So in astrology, there are 10 planets that we look at, but 5 planets are really the ones that we study carefully to look at major shifts. Because the other 5 just move too fast. I mean, like the moon, it moves every 2.5 days into a new sign. You don't really want to be tracking the moon, you'll go crazy. But a planet like Saturn will take 2.5 years to move through a sign. So we really want to look at those 5 slower moving planets to see what they're doing. And for those of you who don't maybe know a lot about astrology, planets are really the meat and the bones of astrology. They are what we're talking about. They symbolize these archetypal energies. So what are the archetypal energies doing? We could say, what are the gods doing? Where are they changing? And how is that going to affect us here on Earth? So as above, so below. So Saturn is moving through the very last degrees of the sign of Pisces, sitting currently, I think, at around 26 degrees of Pisces, every sign being 30 degrees. So as we get closer and closer to those last degrees, things start becoming more and more urgent. There's things that need to be wrapped up. There's a sense of like increasing kind of like, I must close this chapter. So we have Saturn moving very close to those last degrees of Pisces. Neptune is sitting at the 29th degree of Pisces as we speak, and that is the very last degree of a sign. So there really is an ending there, and I'm going to be talking more about that as we go. Uranus is also sitting at around 28 degrees of Taurus. So we really have these planets sitting at these very last degrees of the sign. So what journey in our lives is coming to an end right now? What do we feel this rush to finish up and to let go of? What skin do we need to still shed? So we're still very much in the shedding phase. And then once these planets start moving into their new signs, that's when the new chapter starts birthing for us. So that starts happening all throughout this year. And what's really interesting is that out of these 5 planets that we watch for shifts, for collective shifts, 4 are changing signs this year. So that is a big deal. But it's also not something new. So somewhere between March and September of 2025, 3 of these planets did already move into their new signs. So what happens in astrology with planets is that they're trundling along in their orbits, happy as can be, and then they suddenly go retrograde. So for those of you who maybe don't know what retrograde means, It's when a planet slows down and appears to go backwards. Okay? So whatever that planet symbolizes becomes kind of more pronounced or even problematic, but that's besides the point. What can happen is that a planet can move forward into a new sign and then go backwards into the sign it was in before. So it goes backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards until it finally settles in its new sign. So in that period between March and September of last year, summer for the Northern Hemisphere, winter for the Southern Hemisphere, think back. What kind of little new glimmers did you get? Where did those glimmers come up in your life? Was it in your relationships? Was it in your career? Was it your self-development or your finances? We all kind of attach this positive meaning to new beginnings because we all love it. But it can also be the beginning of an ending, right? It can be other kinds of beginnings. So kind of think back to that time because that's very much how 2026 and beyond is going to play out. So it's almost like 2025 gave us little hints of what was to come. So we're moving very much from this old into the new. And what's also really interesting is that these planets where they're sitting now are in what's known as feminine signs. So Taurus and Pisces are known as feminine, with Jupiter also in Cancer, it's feminine. In astrology, feminine means more passive, softer, kind of not active and assertive and direct as what would masculine be. So all of these planets are shifting from feminine, passive signs into masculine, active signs. Feminine passive signs are planets that are on earth and water elements. So earth and water being very nourishing, very soft, feminine, and they're moving into fire and air, which is very out there, very outgoing, very active, acting in the world. So it is quite almost like an increase in energy. We're doing more than being in a way. We're taking action. And there's less focus on, let's say, comforts and maybe even emotional developments. And we know we've all been through quite an emotional journey, especially with Saturn and Neptune in Pisces. And we're kind of coming into this fire energy, which is more assertive, it's more conquering, it's bolder, it's a little bit more direct. So we're also shifting from water into fire, which really feels like a whole different texture, really. So those are just some kind of feelings about the year. I kind of looked at three main themes or four main themes that really stood out to me. The first one was this is a new chapter. The second one, and this comes through very strongly, it's about individuality and leadership. Very strong themes on that. Technology, the rise of the robots, just going to get more. And just evolution. So also just to keep in mind that there's different ways of approaching these year ahead talks. There's approaching from the collective, which is kind of where we're really going to go tonight. And then there's going into the personal, right? So obviously, like I said, you've got to know your chart or go to an astrologer or study astrology to know where these planets are going to exactly impact you, which area of your life. There's two ways of doing it. So I'm going to go in like sort of date order, starting from the first move or the first ingress. And first, also just want to say how lucky we are not to enter this year on any major retrogrades. Last year, I think I recall entering the year on like 3 or 4 retrogrades. Mercury was retrograde, I think Mars was retrograde, Venus was about to go retrograde. It was just like, it felt like the whole start of 2025 was just stuck, like nothing was going anywhere. Whereas this feels like there's, obviously we still need to move, we're still in this ending, shedding skin, but at least we're not in a retrograde season or an eclipse season. So that is something to kind of celebrate. So we're first looking at 26 Jan. Neptune will be moving into Aries. So we got a little taste of this last year. And obviously, if there's any Aries in the room, please, say it. You can pop it in the chat. You guys are going to be experiencing a lot of the energies this year. So the Aries in the room, the Libras in the room. So if you've got Aries and Libra in your chart, these next few years are going to be absolutely massive for you. And then on a secondary level, anyone with Capricorn or Cancer. And when I say in your chart, I'm really meaning your big three. So if you've got your rising, your sun, or your moon in one of these signs, this is really going to affect you very personally. Yes, I know that you have that, Kieran. So yeah, as Neptune goes into Aries, on the collective sense, it's kind of, firstly, it's the end of a major spiritual journey. So Neptune spends quite a bit of time in a sign, at least 15 years. And so since about 2011, and I remember this very clearly, it's kind of when I really leaped into my spiritual path. And now it feels for me like a lot of people kind of jumped into it back then. It's 2011, 2012, the big thing around 2012 was such a big hoo-ha, and a lot of people embarked on a healing journey. And now it's coming to an end, and we're reaching this kind of spiritual maturity. We can, we're shedding, there might be some old, really old wounds that are coming up, really old kind of things that we thought, oh gosh, I thought I got over this, but we have made so much progress, and this is just an invitation to go a layer deeper and to finally shed so that we can step into Aries. Aries is the first sign of the zodiac. It is the very start. And so this is why it is such an important year for new chapters. Pisces is the very last sign on the zodiacal order. So there's really deep, I would say, almost ancestral karmic stuff that's kind of been shifted at this point as we go into this fresh Aries season. Um, Aries is very, very much about redefining our sense of identity. If we've let go of all the stuff that we were holding on to for the collective, for the ancestors, for everybody, who are we now? And that's going to be a really big question for the world and for us personally. Who are we and how we wish to define ourselves in this world? One thing we need to be very careful on the collective is Neptune is a planet that can be very blurry, it can be very deceptive, it can be very smoke and mirrors. It was discovered around the sort of late 1800s, early 1900s, and so attributed the qualities of that time, which is very much spiritualism, addiction, escapism. Film came out during that time. So Neptune on its highest vibration can be unconditional love, and it can be really powerful divinity and spiritual development, but on its low vibration can be very murky. So we have to be very clear about who we are and what we stand for with Neptune and Aries. And we also have to be very, very clear about the leaders and the mentors that we follow, that we allow into our lives, especially when it comes to things like social media, which is totally smoke and mirrors. It's very, very Neptunian. So we showing up with authenticity actually really becomes a very big task for us personally and for the collective. We need to look past the glamour that people might, show to us, being very careful of false leaders. Leading with compassion becomes very important with Neptune and Aries. And the words that I kind of came up for this time was spiritual warrior. Like, Aries is the warrior archetype, and Neptune's very spiritual. So what are we willing to fight for? What is our spirit willing to fight for? Like I said, this will affect the Aries and the Librans in the room most, with a secondary effect on Capricorn and Cancer. And it's going to take 15 years, right? At some point, Neptune's going to come to one of your big three, and it's going to be a bit of a turning point. There's going to be a bit of confusion. There's going to be maybe even disillusionment, but there's going to be the potential for profound spiritual development and connection. So keep an eye on that. It really depends on which degrees of the sign your planets fall into. Now, Saturn follows hot on the heels of Neptune on the 13th of Feb, also entering Aries. So Saturn and Neptune have been kind of like following each other for quite a while, which is very interesting because they're very different planets, very different archetypes. If we thought about Neptune, it's this mystic, it's kind of like flowy, it's undefined, it's no boundaries, it's addiction, escapism, doesn't really, responsibility is not really Neptune's thing. Whereas Saturn as an archetype is the tough love taskmaster, it's the karmic teacher, it's structure, it's responsibility, it's order, it's authority. So it thrives on boundaries and limitations. It needs structure. So with these two planets traveling together, I kind of think it's a good thing, because if it was just Neptune on his own, things would be very messy and unclear and no boundaries. So Saturn's kind of there and doing a reality check and saying, no, actually, we can't just drift off into the fantasy. We have to take a look at this and see what's real and what's not real. That's been very much a theme around Pisces for the last couple of years. Boundaries has been a massive lesson for a lot of people over this time. Emotional development, looking into how we dissociate, what ways we kind of escape, how do we avoid, how do we take responsibility in those areas. So now that we're moving through away from that Piscean energy and into the Saturn in Aries, this question of identity becomes even more pronounced. So, Neptune's kind of like, who am I? What am I? Where am I supposed to be? Saturn's like, we have to figure out who we are, and this is how we do it. So again, there's this redefinition of who we are. There's this call to develop real courage, real boldness. Saturn doesn't like being in Aries, so certain planets enjoy certain signs because they rule those signs, and certain planets do not thrive in other signs. So Saturn is known as in fall in the sign of Aries. And what this means is that Saturn can't function the best way that he would like. So people that are born with Saturn in Aries will be going through a Saturn return. This will be the time in your life where you'll have to face restriction, responsibility, tests to your courage, call to step up and be brave. Those kinds of themes will come up for you. So anyone sort of between the ages of 28 and 31. And then, of course, the second Saturn return as well. So Aries wants to go really fast. Anyone with Aries in their chart, they're like, foot on the gas, off we go, why are we waiting? Let's do it right now. Whereas Saturn is not about rushing anything. So it's going to be a little bit frustrating. We're going to want to maybe push harder than we should, and we're going to be forced to slow down and be very patient with wherever Saturn is going to touch in our chart. So if Saturn is coming into your second house of money, for those of you with a Pisces rising, for example, you're going to have to be really careful with money. You have to slow down, build solid structures. You might have some tests around your financial structures. Neptune could be dissolving some of your money. So Saturn's like, okay, we need to be like quite wise about this, and we can't rush it. So it can be a bit frustrating. But as we know with Saturn, when we do the work and he stays in a sign for 2 to 3 years, we emerge with the reward afterwards. So going slow in whichever area Saturn is appearing in your chart and having patience is going to be very important. Impulsiveness will not help. Very important to pick our battles as well. With both Saturn and Neptune in Aries, Aries is the warrior, the fighter. Some battles might just not be worth it. On a collective level, these two planets do unite. It's quite an anticipated event by most astrologers on the 20th of February. So they both come together at 0 degrees of Aries, which is quite symbolic. I mean, some people are calling it a global reset. I feel like I've heard that 1,000 times though, so I'm a little bit skeptical. But also global resets can take a long time to unfold. For me, without being alarmist, Aries is a sign of war. It's 0 degrees. So I'm kind of like, where are we going to go to war in our lives? What is worth fighting for? And what battles do we need to pick? So on the collective and on the personal, I feel like that's going to be very much what it's about. Some people are saying, it's got to do with illness, or it's got to do with money, or it's economics. I'm not what's called a political or mundane astrologer, so I don't even read the news. So for me, this is kind of like, I'm more interested in the personal. How can we be the change that we want to see in the world? So a big question again, just to leave you guys with those two planets, is who am I and how do I want to show up with authenticity? That feels like the big question to sit with in the year ahead and in the years beyond. So again, people with Aries in their charts, with Libra in their charts, you guys are really going to feel the push of Saturn to a second degree, the Cancer and the Capricorn. The next 2 to 3 years, Saturn is going to appear in your life. He is going to test you. You are going to have responsibilities. You are going to have certain structures that are going to be put into place. All very, very important. Thirdly, we have Uranus moving into Gemini on the 25th of April. Now, Uranus has been in Taurus. So, for all the Taurians in the room, finally, you're getting a break from the Uranian energy. For me, I really love Uranus. I'm extremely biased. I'm an Aquarius. I've got lots of planets in Aquarius. I've got lots of Uranus energy in my chart. I've been under the influence of Uranus for 3 or 4 years now, and I love it. I never wanted to stop. But for a lot of us who really thrive in stability and predictability and certainty, Uranus is a living nightmare. And so, for those who have Taurus in their charts anywhere, who have Scorpio in their charts anywhere, and then to a second degree, Aquarius or Leo, you've been really experiencing this Uranian chaotic energy for a number of years, about 7 years, on and off. Um, and since Uranus was in Taurus, Uranus is the change maker. So it's chaos, it's change, it's freedom. But it's usually freedom through disrupting the entire status quo. It's throwing the baby out with the bathwater. It's not very considerate. It's very wild, reckless energy. And in Taurus, it's been really shifting the landscape of our relationships. So, relationship frameworks have become pretty wild in the last 7 years. We have lots of open relating, and this one has a boyfriend and a girlfriend and a friend, and everyone has everyone. And that's actually been a very beautiful gift. We've also had cryptocurrency come in, which is the freedom around our finances, looking at new ways of handling money. We've had the digital rise of the digital nomad. Taurus also rules the home and security. So all of these things, for those of us who are sort of more, disposed to Uranian energy, this has been absolutely amazing. It's definitely changed the world. So Uranus is ready to move on and move into Gemini, which is a much more comfortable sign for Uranus. Um, Gemini is an air sign. It's thinky, it's rational, it's brilliant, it's talkative, it's education, it's flighty. And so Uranus in Gemini is very revolutionary. It's revolutionizing our ideas, our education. The last time that Uranus was in Gemini was when the travel industry aviation was created, basically 84 years ago. So I'm very interested to see how travel is going to be even more revolutionized. What kind of passports are we going to use? As a traveler myself, it's very, very exciting. The education industry is, already undergoing a change. It's going to undergo even more change, more digitization. So obviously there's a downside to every planet and every sign. So what we've also got to be aware of is with Uranus and Gemini, we can go into information overload. We need to be very careful because Gemini is also very tricksy. It's a sign of the trickster. So we might be very easily tricked on like social medias or people's stories, especially because Neptune is in Aries and people are not necessarily always going to show up as their true, authentic selves. So our radar needs to be very, very strong. Our intuition needs to be very, very strong. Our self-care needs to be very, very strong. We need to very much manage our overload and overwhelm, especially when it comes to information and the consumption of information. And this is especially true for AI and for things like ChatGPT or Gemini. Interesting that, Google has called one of the AI Gemini, and it's just definitely not a coincidence. They probably have astrologers working behind the scenes there because Gemini rules things like chats and information and instant information. And so Uranus was in Gemini for a little bit of last year, and that was just when like AI and ChatGPT and all these instant things became really, really pronounced, and now more so than ever. It's not going to go away. So we're either going to have to beat them or join them. So taking care of the nervous systems, very important to speak our truth over this time, no matter how radical it is, no matter how opposing it might be. I did notice the one thing I did read online the other day was that Australia has banned social media for, I think, under 16s. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. That feels like a Uranus in Gemini. That feels like a Pluto in Aquarius. And actually, I like that. I like that. I mean, maybe I'm being biased here, but it's allowing us to become mature with our use of technology rather than it kind of being a free for all. So that was something that I thought was quite interesting. So obviously, for those in the room, I don't know if there's anyone here with a lot of Gemini in their charts. Um, you're going to experience some wild Uranian chaotic energy for the next 6 or 7 years. Well, not for the next 6 or 7 years, but at some point for about a year, it's going to be really, really wild. Freedom is the gift. So lean into that. What are you being liberated from? A job, a relationship, a situation, even if it seems very unexpected. Sagittarians are also going to feel, yes, Sagittarians are also going to feel this energy because Uranus will be opposing your sign. Pisces, you're still going to get a bit of Uranian, which is great. I mean, it's exactly what you want after the Saturn heaviness, and then Virgos as well, some Uranian energy. And you might have already been feeling this if you have those planets in the very early degrees because Uranus has already visited Gemini. All right, so those are the three major shifts of planets. There isn't one more shift, but it's not as major. And then there's a few things in between that are going to also affect 2026. So our fourth contender is Chiron. So Chiron is known as the wounded healer. It's not a planet, it's an asteroid. And not many astrologers work with it. Some do, some don't. I find it to be quite effective, but only in very particular kinds of astrological combinations. But why this might be relevant for some people is that Chiron has been in Aries for the last many years. I don't even know how many, lots of years. And so for those of us, again, with Aries in our charts, at some point, Chiron would have come along and the wounded healer would have been as an archetype, would have been very pronounced in our lives at that point. And so we may have had to work through emotional wounds or, self-worth wounds or relationship wounds or those kinds of things. But it's the wounded healer. So he's both the poison and the medicine. So the poison arises at the same time as the medicine, and it kind of facilitates this beautiful alchemical process. What is most outstanding about this is for anybody that has been sort of 50 years old, 51, 52, you've been moving through something called your Chiron return in the last couple of years. And that's also been a very deep journey, a deep healing journey for many of you. For those of you who are kind of 50, 51, 52 now going into the future, you're going to be soon having your Chiron return, which is also for you a very big moment in your life of healing and maturing. On the collective, so this starts in June and lasts until September 26th, just for a few months. It touches Taurus and then it goes back into Aries, and then 2027 it goes fully into Taurus because of retrograde. On a collective level, we're going to be working through fears and wounds that were maybe brought up by the Uranus and Taurus transits the last several years. So remember, we were talking about relationships, we were talking about stability, home, and we were talking about finances. So a good piece of advice that I could lend, something practical, is if we feel like this is coming up, especially if you're going through your Chiron return, because these will be embedded wounds in your life. Or if you have any planets in Taurus, any personal planets, moon, sun, rising, even Venus, I would definitely advise, go to a relationship coach, coach yourself on conscious relating, get a financial coach, read up on property law and property tax, think about why you might feel you're not worthy of these things, what is holding you back. So getting practical support for those people in particular might be very helpful. Yeah. So some good news is Jupiter, which is our planet of abundance and all the yummy, happy things, is going to be moving into Leo at the end of June this year. So for the last year or so, you would have been in the sign of Cancer. So for anyone that has Cancer in their charts, they have your sun, moon, or rising especially, it still feels like quite a lovely time for you. Very emotional because Cancer is a highly emotional sign, very sensitive. We might find that, Jupiter tends to expand whatever energy of the sign that he's in. So For me, I've been seeing a lot of big feelings come up in the last year while Jupiter's been in Cancer, like very heart stuff and inner child stuff and home stuff and mother stuff. That seems to have been quite a strong theme with Jupiter in Cancer. But Jupiter likes being in Cancer. He's exalted in that sign. So the whatever's come up has been a beautiful emotional purge, and potentially offered some really deep healing on those topics. But it is a very sensitive place for Jupiter to be. It does touch our deepest kinds of core safety themes in our lives, the inner child safety. So I would say continue working on this on a spiritual level until the middle of the year. Continue, working in the family realm, doing work like family constellations, having those conversations, whether in real life or in your head with parents and children and siblings. Defining what home is for you as well. Home can be anywhere on the globe as long as you have your family, which is also sometimes your friends around you. So Jupiter in Cancer is quite known to have a global family. So really focusing on those things to give us joy. And then he goes into Leo. And then it expands all the Leo qualities. So if there's anyone here with Leo in their charts, this is going to be a really, and Jupiter only comes into a sign every 12 years. So it's really important to make the most of it while he's there. So Leos don't need much of an excuse to have a good time. They just give them the slightest invitation. Cindy's like, woo, yay. It's very, Leo is big-hearted, romance, pleasure, fun, going out, dancing, exploring, performing, being on a stage, expressing yourself, your individuality. So these it can really expand the sense of worth, a sense of self, open our hearts in a more sort of fiery, passionate, joyful way. It's a fun time. What I found really interesting is that 3 planets, Saturn, Neptune, and Jupiter, are in these fire signs. And not only just any old fire signs, Leo and Aries, which are known as the 2 most individualistic signs in the zodiac. So there's very much this emphasis on developing oneself, one's identity, who I am, how do I appear, how do I show up, what is resonant with me. The shadow side is selfishness. Yeah, we'll just call a spade a spade. Jupiter can also inflate the ego. Oh, hold on. Okay, I had a moment of freeze there. So Jupiter can inflate the ego, and Saturn in Aries at its worst can overcompensate when it feels insecure, which most of us actually end up doing. That's just a human thing. So really, tuning into ourselves and actually getting really honest with ourselves, saying, oh, where do we not feel good enough? And where do we feel like maybe we have to perform or be someone else in order to be accepted or to belong? Might be some good reflective questions to ask. Because we can go into the shadow of almost egoism or becoming the sort of the ego maniac. And also looking at, the world stage, whose egos are running away with them. I'm not going to say any names, but really just like thinking about these things and with ourselves as well. But it's a wonderful time with Jupiter and Leo to play, to access that inner child, to be more bold, to take more risks. Saturn in Aries might be a bit scared to do that at first, but as Saturn in Aries matures, it learns which risks it can take and which risks are just to prove something, right? So we don't need to prove anything. That's a very important piece as well. What I do find quite interesting is I have also noticed that at the same time, around July, the moon's nodes change signs. So these are very karmic points in astrology. In Vedic astrology or Eastern astrology, they're called Rahu and Ketu. Rahu being the dragon's head and Ketu being the dragon's tail. So Rahu is the north node and Ketu is the south node. And, so Rahu or the north node is about growth and expansion. It's a lot like Jupiter, but it's also very craving. It's kind of craving, I want, I want, I want. Whereas the south node is a bit like Saturn. It's more contracting, more draining, more emptying. And there's kind of like a meaninglessness that can happen there. But what can often happen as well with the south node is that whatever sign it's in, it can bring up the deep shadows of that sign. So what's happening now as we speak, the North Node is currently still in Pisces and the South Node is in Virgo. So for those of us with Pisces Virgo in our charts, we're feeling like these karmic shifts quite strongly. I mean, I've got lots of Pisces in my own chart. For me, this is why this, past year has been one of the most karmic years I've ever experienced in terms of the people I've met and the experiences I've had. But what I've noticed on the collective is that, especially during the recent eclipses, so we had eclipses around October of last year and then around March of last year as well. There's 2 eclipse seasons. They were in Pisces and Virgo. Was that the shadow of the South Node in Virgo was really pronounced. Perfectionism, over-analyzing, sweating over the small stuff, worrying, kind of like this neurosis type of energy, not being able to let go of control. And the North Node in Pisces is kind of like, just trust and surrender. The universe has got this. And South Node Virgo is like, no ways. I have to make a spreadsheet and count every single last penny in my bank account because nothing's going to work out if I don't control it. So we've been kind of like dancing between these polarities quite a bit in the last year or so. It's going to continue until July, until these North and South nodes shift into Leo and Aquarius. So pay attention to which areas of your life where you feel like this need to hold on and control and plan versus what is actually easeful and flowing, and where's the universe opening up these vistas for us. When the South Node goes into Leo, remember I just mentioned that Jupiter is going to be in Leo. This can be a little bit dangerous for that egomania that I was mentioning. And so this can be where the shadow aspects of self-expression, of boldness and creativity and courage and love. That's where, if we know any Leos in our lives, we bless and know and love them. When they're in the dark phase of their self-expression, they can be very dramatic and very overbearing and very domineering and very controlling. Not you, Cindy, because you far evolved beyond that. You've ascended. But on a collective, we do need to be very mindful of where these shadow things are coming up. And it might come from, and we need to hold this in compassion, because it can be very much about, where am I not being seen? Where am I not being validated? Where am I not being appreciated for my generosity, for what I give? Because the Leo's got such a big heart. It gives and gives and gives and gives, and it's got the loyalty till the death. Where somebody, people are not being loyal to me. They're letting me down. So those can be some of the reasons why we have these patterns that come up that are, I must control, I must be louder, I must shout bigger, I must be more of a personality. So those are some of the patterns that might come up with the Jupiter in Leo. So you see, we have this invitation to grow and expand and express, but we also have the warning of just make sure that you're not trampling over everybody else in your climb. And then we got to cultivate the qualities of the North Node in Aquarius, which incidentally will happen to be, it's the same sign that Pluto is currently in. So we have Jupiter and the South Node in Leo, we have Pluto and the North Node in Aquarius. And so for me, there's very much this drive towards Aquarian energy. And I'm I'm an Aquarius, triple Aquarius. So for me, yay. Dawning of the age of Aquarius. There's no coincidence that we're talking about the age of Aquarius either. So we are shifting in that way towards the collective. What is beneficial to our brothers and our sisters? What is beneficial to society? What is going to be okay for the whole, not just for me? So those are some of the questions that we're going to look at. And also, how can I bring rationality and objectivity to the situation rather than just blowing up? So that becomes a collective task, and a good task for leaders to kind of think about as well. Because again, we have this leadership energy that's very pronounced. We can't just go blowing things up and marching into people's homes and countries and places and dominating, right? We've got to really what is going to be good for everybody. So the shift, the focus here is, where do we need to develop more personal freedom? Freedom becomes a big theme here. Where do we belong? In what communities do we actually belong to? who resonates with us. Those are some of the things that our souls are going to really crave to move towards. What is my head saying, and how can I marry that with my heart? You know, there's going to be a bit of a ping pong there as well. But finding that integration is super important. With Pluto still in Aquarius, you know, he's not going to leave Aquarius for another 20 years. So we're still looking at major breakthroughs in technology, huge rise of AI, the robots. I say this every year, and I will say it for the next 20 years, be very careful of giving our power to the robots. You know, we've seen so much on social media about like people using chat as their therapist and their lawyer and their doctor, which is cool. It's great that we have the support, especially for people who don't have access to that. But be careful of giving our power of decision over, you know, to the technology. It can feel very, very tempting to believe that the technology, and I did this amazing thing the other day. It wasn't on purpose, but I typed out this letter, this thing that I wanted to say, and I put it in ChatGPT, and I was like, okay, give me your thoughts. And it was very validating, and yeah, I'm so right, and I'm so mature, and this is so great. And then and then I was like, well, someone wrote this to me. I was like, and I pasted the same letter in there, and it totally criticized the writer of the letter. And I was like, well, actually, that's me. So what I realized in that moment is that this Uranus and Gemini AI thing, it has two faces. And to put our trust and our choice in these things can end up backfiring on us. We need a lot of maturity to be able to deal with the monumental growth we're going to see in technology. So that's something to be very mindful with Pluto and Aquarius. We don't know really where it's going to go. We do know that there's going to be this it's a societal revolution. It's happening. Nothing we can do to stop it. We just have to sit back and watch and see how it's going to unfold. So for those of us who have Aquarius in our charts anywhere, we've got an Aquarius rising, I see. We've got a moon in Leo. The Aquarians are going to go through at some point during the next 20 years a major personal transformation. Leos as well, it's a sign opposite to Aquarius. And then on a secondary level, the Scorpios and the Taurians. It's going to be a slow process. Some of us may have already started feeling this Pluto energy. Well, definitely would have started feeling it because it came up in January 23 already. I always see the Pluto as as the archetype of Hades, Lord of the Underworld, or Persephone, Shiva, these very powerful, destructive kind of force, but it's also the transformative force, the evolutionary. So I do feel like we're going to see society destroyed as it is and recreated. And will it be for the good or bad? We can't really judge. So for those of us going through a Pluto phase or a Pluto cycle, this is a huge process of purging and of changing. And it's kind of like your own personal year of the snake, just for a longer time. It's your number 9 year, but extended. So if you go into this year and you think, oh, it's a number 9 year, now it's a number 1, it's not the snake anymore, it's the horse, I'm free. But you still have a Pluto transit going on, you might be like, well, this doesn't resonate with me. It's because you've got that Pluto going on in your chart. So again, it really kind of boils down to your own personal birth chart and what's going on there for you. Like I said, on the collective, we are almost at the end of the 9 year, about to on the precipice of number 1. It's really supported by Neptune and Saturn going into Aries, uniting at 0 degrees of Aries in February. We're going from the snake into the horse. I'm very kind of like, yay, for the horse. I'm more compatible with the horse. So it's a moving year. It's like a galloping year. It's taking action. It's starting things. It's new chapters. It's redefining ourselves. It's action, collectively and personally. The final little player in 2026 to mention is Venus. Usually we wouldn't mention Venus in a talk like this, but she is going retrograde around October this year. So Venus only goes retrograde every 18 months, which makes this quite important. So I work a lot with Venus energy. She is my favorite planet. And of course, we know her as Aphrodite, the goddess of love and beauty and relationships and money and pleasure, all the nice things. So when she goes retrograde, when she slows down in her orbit and appears to go backwards, everything that she represents is, enhanced, but not necessarily in a positive sense. It's really brought to light, which means that we're really going to be looking at our relationships. Are they still fit? Are we going to be looking at our finances? Things might be a bit tricky. What are our values the same as they were 18 months ago? Do they need to change? So these are very like generalizations for Venus retrograde. And generally speaking, it's going to affect the Taurus and the Libra the most because you guys are ruled by Venus. It is your ruling planet. So if you have your sun or your rising in Taurus and Libra, this is going to affect you the most. And she will be going retrograde in the sign of Libra as well as the sign of Scorpio. So the theme here is quite interesting. We're going to go from that scorpionic shadow energy, especially in relationships. We're going to be looking at shadow material around relationships, in particular, power, the balance of power, jealousy, things like jealousy, obsession, control. That's all the sort of things that Scorpio would need to work on. And then, in an evolutionary sense, is kind of going into a more transformative, deep relating. That's the higher vibration of Scorpio. So we'll begin by going from quite intense shadow material, and then we'll move into the Libran energy is really exploring and investigating any inequalities in our relationship. Libra wants balance and equality. So any relationship, we're going to be looking at those kinds of themes and trying to fix whatever is imbalanced and unfair. October 23rd is going to be a particularly potent date for that, where things are really going to be quite pronounced. We're going to be a little bit more confronting around these issues. Things like people-pleasing tendencies we're going to have to look at. And I quite like Venus retrograde because it gives us the opportunity to really take a dive. Whenever a planet goes retrograde, it's meant to go retrograde. It's not meant to harm us or hurt us. It's here to help us. It's here to help us just press the brakes, take a pause, reassess, and then start over. So we move very fast, especially in this society. We never take a moment to breathe, really. And is this relationship good for me? And am I okay earning money like this? And does this actually measure up to my values? We need these moments. Otherwise, we just keep on going. So that's what we kind of close off the year with. And then sprinkled throughout the year will be the usual Mercury retrogrades at their various dates, all in water signs this year. So for those Mercury retrograde periods, it's very intuitive time periods. It's going to be better to read read between the lines, read the feelings beneath the words rather than try and make logistical sense during those Mercury retrograde periods. But we have them every year, Mercury retrogrades, when communication goes a bit upside down. So it's really sort of not the end of the world and a great time to pause, think, feel, intuit. Is this right? Is what I'm saying, what I'm feeling, those kinds of things. So yeah, so that will make Neptune changing, Saturn changing, Uranus changing, Chiron changing, Jupiter changing, the nodes changing. So it's a year of a lot of shifts and it goes quite well into 2027. So there will be Jupiter will change signs in 2027, but for the most part, these planets are here to stay for quite a while, which is why 2026 is quite pivotal. Neptune will stay in Aries for 15 years. Saturn will stay in Aries for about 3 years. Uranus will stay in Gemini for about 7 years. Chiron in Taurus will be kind of jumping between Aries and Taurus until 2027, but then he'll stay for a while. And then the nodes are going to stay in Leo and Aquarius for 18 months. So 2026 is very much like a stage or a platform from which to jump. It's one of those pivotal kinds of years. And like I said, we've had a taste of it in the middle months of 2025. So it's not a total shock to the system. We have been a little bit prepared. We kind of know what's coming. And it's not about fear mongering. It's about preparing ourselves. It's about saying, okay, I want to work with the energies of these planets. I want to make the most of them. I don't want to struggle upstream. So how can I align myself? Where in my life can I express more authentically? What battles am I going to pick? What's important to me? How do I need to express myself spiritually? How do I shine my lights? I know it's such a cliched term, but it really is an important one for this year. How do I shine my light? Where can I actually leverage technology to support me and help me in my work, my business, my writing, my thinking, my education? How can I use these technologies as a supportive mechanism? How can I mature with these technologies? In what way can I give back to society? How can I emphasize education for myself? How can I lean into these changes? Where can I be more patient? These are the kinds of questions that we can ask ourselves in 2026. And again, it really comes down to where these planets are falling in your chart, which houses they're showing up in, which planets they're making connections to, for you to really know actually what's plotting and what's going on for you personally. So I managed to do that in an hour, 45 minutes actually. I'm quite proud of myself. We're going to open the floor for questions, and I know that Cindy probably has a bit to share, and I need some water.
So, Margarita, thank you so much for highlighting those various different things. And I'm curious about technology and AI. It's one of my passions, and how we're going to navigate the shadow and the light of that. So, and the other thing I'm curious about is, for me, it felt like 2025. We had 2 years in 8 months, if
Mm,
that makes sense.
mm, mm.
Is 2026 going to slow down at all, or are we going to do 6 months that feels like 2 years?
It's not going to slow down. We're in the year of the horse. We're galloping forward. We're also
Yeah.
in Aries energy. Aries is not going to wait around for anybody. So I think time's moving pretty fast at this point.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we just got to
So
keep up.
so great, and just learn to hold that energy with the information that you've given us, these anchors. Because I also think, if we know what's coming, we can ground ourselves and observe it in a way, and put in,
Mm,
I know the shadow's coming and what is the medicine in that, rather than going, oh my God, it's going to be a busier year than it was, and
mm,
etc. So I think, thank you for those insights. I've
mm,
got one question which I'm going to just read to you, that came in really earlier, and I think it's a good one. Is
mm,
why is it important to know your rising
mm,
sign, rather than your sun sign? This
mm,
person knows all three, but what is that? And I've also popped in the chat the workshop you're going to be doing next week for those who
mm,
don't know their moon. So if you could
mm.
just,
Yeah.
double those
Bundle
up,
it all
as I
together.
say. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a really great question. When it comes to predictive work, knowing your rising sign is absolutely key. Because, for example, if there's anybody here with the Pisces as their rising sign, right? You've been experiencing the transit or the movement of Saturn and Neptune in your first house, which is the same thing as your rising, for the last couple of years. That has a very particular meaning. And now those two planets are going to move into your second house, which is your finances. So we do prediction by knowing the rising sign. We calculate where the planets are according to your rising sign. So that's really why it's the most useful thing to know when it comes to predictive work. Obviously, knowing your sun can also be really, really helpful, because if, for example, you're a Pisces sun, you have been experiencing the transit or the movement of Saturn and Neptune on your sun. So that also has a particular meaning, and you will have also been feeling those energies of those planets in a particular way. But the rising sign for prediction is really, it's on point. So Zorina, you're a Capricorn. How do you determine the rising sign? It's a great question. I mean, there are so many apps out there these days. I'm a big fan of obviously the ones that I write for. So Astromatrix is where you can get a free chart and it will show your rising sign. You can also go on an app called The Pattern. If you want daily or weekly horoscopes, the Moon Calendar by Laura Hayworth is also really good. So those are the apps that I would recommend. Otherwise, you can also go on a site called astro.com and you can learn to generate your own charts. I would caution against doing it on ChatGPT. For anybody who's trying to learn astrology, ChatGPT is great if you already know something. If you know that your rising sign is Aries, then you say, tell me about my rising sign in Aries. But if you tell ChatGPT to work out your rising sign, it's a disaster. So don't do it. Um, Linda. Yes, so this is all Western astrology, Linda. That's a really good distinction to make. There's Western and Eastern. They were developed in very different ways. They are both very relevant. So Western astrology, it's quite complex to go into, and I cover this in my foundation course, but in a nutshell, Western astrology is catered for life experiences and themes really here in this human form, right? Our soul lessons and everything, yes, it is contained, but it is very grounded on this earth. Eastern astrology is yes, it's got to do with Earth, but it's got a very, very karmic component to it. And you'll find that if you get a Vedic reading and a Western reading, the Vedic reading will have no qualms about telling you about your grandmother's death by poison when you are 13 years old, whereas Western astrology will be a bit kinder. Um, so your chart will change as well in each system. It's too much technical information to go into, but it doesn't mean that it's wrong. Okay, it just means that it's calculated via a different method. It's the same information. Like if you go to a tarot reader, a Vedic astrologer, and a numerologist, they should be telling you all the same information. If they don't, they're not doing their job properly. Yeah? So don't sweat it if your ascendant is different in Vedic as it is in Western. It is as it's meant to be. Yeah, Cindy's actually, so Lindsay, I've used some free chart websites. They're giving different information. Which version do I focus on? Well, if you can give me the charts, the places that you've been using, I can definitely tell you which one is better. But if you're talking about Western, go with Western. We are living in the West. Western astrology is made for Westerners. We don't have the spiritual grounding the way that the East does. So you can hear about your grandmother dying of poisoning at 13 years old if you're, Indian, because you've got that deep, deep embedded cultural, long spiritual foundation to draw upon. So it's not so terrifying as someone who's traditionally grown up in the West and maybe doesn't have that deep belief system to help them and support them through things. So this is why the Western system really is helpful for the Western mind. And as we go deeper, of course, that we then can start progressing to the Eastern forms of astrology because we have that grounding foundation. But for now, I would say definitely work with your Western charts. Yeah, so next week we are going to be doing a Moon in the Inner You workshop. So for those of you who are a bit more curious about your moon sign, and what the moon represents in your charts on your inner world, that's going to be a course that we're going to do. It's going to be sort of 2 hours next week. It's very affordable. And then for those of you who are like really mad about astrology and you're obsessed like me, because it is quite an obsessive art. We are going to be launching the foundational beginners course on the 16th of February. It runs for 3 months, every Monday evening. All the details are online. This course, Cindy will say, I mean, both courses get quite full. And I only run the beginners course every 2 years. So, and I take a limited number of people. So if you want to hop on and join me, it's really, and it's recorded. So you can be anywhere in the world. It doesn't fit. And it's accredited and all the good things. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Self-promotion over.
Well, you did that well for you, Marguerite.
Yeah.
But yes, everyone. Just to say, for next week there are only 20 places, and a lot of those tickets have already sold. So if you don't know your moon, please book sooner rather than later because Marguerite actually holds that only in a group of 20. It's not going to be a big group like today. So if you are a bit like me and trying to figure things out, you can still answer questions and help you get to that point. So if you haven't booked and you want to know that, book and don't be disappointed because it will sell out by next week. So that's important. And the same also goes. We don't have that many. When I looked at the bookings, that many places left for the self-empowerment, Marguerite. Are
Mm.
there any further questions? So we've got an
Yes,
exciting,
we've got
yeah.
time. Yeah, we've got
Does
time if
anyone
you
else
want to
got
use
it?
my brain.
Yeah, and if somebody wants to put up their hand, because if you're thinking a question, somebody else is thinking the same question.
Yeah. And usually, if your heart's beating really fast, that's the moment where you have to ask the question. Now, that's what I learned. A lot of the courses I did. But yeah.
Uh, well, I think everyone's got what they need. Also to just say so next week we've got Marguerite doing the little mini course. And then the week after that, we're going to link up tarot with that. So if you've got some themes around 2026, then Soleil is going to be doing what kind of cards are you going to pull to do that. So again, you've got some preparation, you've got some ideas around as we go, as we heard, we're still actually in the year of the snake, as we go into the Chinese New Year and the horse, so you can really complete
Mm.
uh, uh, all of that. Hectic year for me, says Sarah. Okay, Sarah. I
Yeah,
think,
so yeah, actually I want to answer that.
yeah.
So Sarah, you not necessarily, because it really depends, where it is your rising is, like what degree of Aquarius, what degree of your moon in Libra. So you might find that if your rising in Aquarius is only at like 18 degrees, you're only going to have Pluto on your rising sign in like 10 years. So no, it's definitely not going to be hectic. And your moon in Libra,
Apparently, it's quite early in.
yeah, yeah. So if
Oh,
it's
sorry to
early,
interrupt.
then you're going to
Apparently, it's
feel the
quite
Pluto.
early in Aquarius.
Yeah. Yes, then
Okay.
then you're going to feel that
Damn.
Pluto for sure. Yeah, yeah, then it's a big year for you. I love Pluto. I'm all for Pluto. Pluto and Uranus, I'm like, let's go. Even Saturn, love Saturn. I kind of shy away a little bit from Neptune. But as you move through these things, it's not about fear. It's about kind of like the excitement of the transformation. Okay, what's going to be purged so that I can actually be more of myself. So yeah, it's definitely not about generating fear or fear mongering, but it's about saying like you never really get the lesson until your soul is ready for it. And that's something that I've learned over the years of practicing is that when the transit comes, when the planet comes along, it is exactly the right moment for that planet to come along. You are ready, you are ripe, your soul is ripe for this lesson. Let's go. And you look back and you think, wow, that was actually pretty cool. So yeah.
Ah, even if you're a
Yeah.
dramatic Leo, there's another great question here, Marguerite, and I'm so curious to find out what you're going to say about this. Could you expand more on the age of Aquarius coming as compared to the situation
Yeah.
in the
The 70s.
1970s? I
Yeah,
think
so this is actually it's not a top, it's a very convoluted topic. So astrologers don't agree across the board about when the age of Aquarius has actually started. It's very technical. Some say from my opinion, it didn't start in the 70s. It was coming, people were seeing it coming, but they weren't necessarily, we weren't in it. And actually, what was really interesting about that time, there was some stuff happening in Aquarius that was kind of like convoluting Aquarius themes of freedom and brotherhood and revolution and, free love and all of the things. But we're still it's a very slow burn. It's a very slow progress. These planets move incredibly slowly. So it's not like tomorrow is the age of Aquarius. We're already making the transition as we speak. And Aquarius is about technology, freedom, um, the nomad, the brotherhood, the collective. So we're already in that transition. It's happening as we speak. The 70s, I think, was just it was the taste of it. It was the coming of it, but it wasn't it necessarily.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're in it
So,
now.
so I have, without any astrology, I've been thinking a lot about that stage, and I think that is sort of set some kind of foundation around where we're going as a species. That was kind of like the igniting of the love consciousness and the new earth consciousness, and
Mm,
kind of, and then we're going through different phases. So I think that's how it's always felt to me. It was a very important time in our evolution. And I think we're going to call on it again as things might get a little bit tougher. Um,
mm,
through,
mm,
you were talking about earlier the war and the war with ourselves and pick up
mm,
battles and things. So I'm really curious around that. I
mm.
just want to say, somebody's asked a question. I'm also going to pop the link to Margarita's beautiful new website.
Oh, yeah.
If you haven't had an astrological reading and you want to know more and you've been excited by that, I promise you it's such a worthwhile reference to have, to do it once a year or once every couple of years. A, just to, it gives you a kind of comfort
Mm,
around, okay, I'm going through this. I'm in my Saturn return, having been just come out of my own Saturn return. Kind of having that knowledge and being able to anchor in that is really supportive to the choices you make and how you make them. And also even being a dramatic Leo, that and this too will pass,
mhm,
um, is
mm.
really important. So if any of you are interested in having a one-on-one reading. I'm not sure how booked up Margarita is at the moment, but if she can't help you, I'm sure she can always point you in the direction of somebody who can. There's also a really good question from Ilse.
Mm.
Hi, Ilse. Nice to see you. Can you say a bit more about Chiron's transition on a collective level for our planet?
Yes, I quickly want to answer Molly. Do I recommend any books to read around astrology? I'm feeling a calling to learn it deeper. I read textbooks. When I did my 3-year diploma, I just read textbooks. So my recommendations are always going to be very academic, and it's usually for study purposes. I have a very specific interest in relationship astrology or conscious relating. So for me, there was a book, I think, called Relating by Liz. So anything by Liz Green for me was just, she also does a book called Saturn, an Old Look at a New Devil. Liz Green is just phenomenal. Jan Spiller is also amazing. She does really deep work on the moon's nodes. So Jan Spiller, Liz Green, and then anything by Bernadette Brady is going to blow your mind. I mean, it's very deep astrology. It's not like cookie cutter. It's like really. I know that Shani Nicholas also released a book quite recently saying "Live Your Best Life" or something, and I think that's also a good access point. There's a book called "The Astrology and the Authentic Self," which I remember reading and really, really enjoying. And again, I do recommend the pattern. I actually think it's quite a legit app. Um, Pleasure. So, Ilse, yeah, current transition in a collective. I mean, it's going into Taurus. So, and we're only going to see it for a few months until it really lands in Taurus properly in 2027. So for me, collectively, this is the exposing the wound of Taurus, of attachment to the material, attachment to security, fears around self-worth, around finances, relationships. And that's why I kind of mentioned it would be really good at that time to have experts in our lives on relationships, on money, on things like security, because it will enhance, it will bring those things to the fore like any poison does. It will put it through its paces. So we might experience this tests around our relationship, tests around our financial security and abundance. So how do we navigate those things with more consciousness? And that's only really if we haven't been doing the work around that. Um, I like Chiron because as the wound comes in, so does the medicine. Oh, we've got such a nice. Thank you, Cindy. Oh, this one is interesting language. But thank you for that. Yeah. For the planets, yeah, I mean, that's the collective as well. Relationships, wounds and the healing. What's the medicine? What medicine do we use to treat that?
Good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Anybody else before we wrap up the evening and say a wonderful big thank you to Margarita? Um, I think we did just share her address, but I'll do that again.
Thank you. I think
Um, but yeah,
there we go.
please.
Yeah, it's a pleasure, everyone. Thank you for your attention. I mean, it's yeah, beautiful to see such a full room. Hope to see you, some of you on the next talk. The app was called The Pattern, Linda. Will the moon be recorded to perchance, Cindy? What are we gonna
Uh,
do? Not
so
sure.
for those of you who purchase it, if you are going to just watch the recording, reach out to us, and so if they, I'm just going to get the recording, we can send you that. I feel comfortable with that because it's information that can be shared, so we can do that. But it's so lovely to see all of you and just have this wonderful group of collective energy again. As I said earlier, for those who didn't hear, I'm actually glad to be back at work and be back in the community and not dealing with all the crap in my head. So it's really nice to see all of you and be back here. Margarita, as always, thank you for showing up and sharing your wisdom and knowledge with the community. It's really helpful to do this at the beginning of the year. I look forward to seeing all of you soon. If you're going to join us, please, please, please come on the 22nd. Soleil holds a fantastic masterclass, and we've got lots more coming up. So we're going to be busy, and I'm going to be seeing you often. So keep well, keep cool if you're in the southern hemisphere, keep warm if you're in the northern hemisphere, and we see you all again soon. Good night, everyone.
Night, everyone. Thank you
Good
so
night.
much. Thanks,
Thank
Cindy.
you.
Bye.
Bye.